The interstate highway stretched endlessly through the flat plains of Nebraska, where the October wind carried the scent of harvested corn and diesel fuel. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the sun hung low in the crystalline sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Traffic was sparse, just the occasional semi-truck hauling goods across America's heartland. Among the few vehicles on the road was a modest 2015 Honda Civic, silver with a slight dent on the rear bumper. Behind the wheel sat Marcus Chen, a man whose appearance suggested nothing remarkable. He wore a simple gray sweater, jeans that had seen better days, and wire-rimmed glasses that he adjusted every few minutes out of habit. His salt-and-pepper hair was neatly combed, and his weathered hands gripped the steering wheel with the careful attention of someone who had driven many miles.
What no one passing him would know, what nothing about his appearance would suggest, was that Marcus Chen was worth approximately $4.7 billion. The founder and CEO of North Star Technologies, a Canadian company that had revolutionized renewable energy storage systems, Marcus had spent the last 30 years building an empire. Yet here he was, driving himself across Nebraska in a decade-old Honda, heading to visit his elderly mother in a nursing home in Omaha. Marcus preferred it this way.
After his wife Ellen passed away 3 years ago, he'd grown tired of the trappings of wealth. The private jets felt empty. The mansion in Vancouver echoed with loneliness. So he'd taken to these road trips, driving across North America, staying in modest motels, eating at small-town diners. It helped him feel human again, connected to the world Ellen had always insisted they remain part of, despite their wealth. He was humming along to an old Johnny Cash song on the radio when he noticed the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. Before we continue with this incredible story, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next inspiring tale. Now, let's get back to what happened next. Officer Derek Hastings had been having a terrible month. His wife had filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. His teenage son wouldn't speak to him, and his application for detective had been rejected for the 3rd time. At 42 years old, he felt stuck, angry, and looking for something, anything, to give him a sense of control. When he clocked the silver Honda doing 73 in a 65 zone, something inside him snapped. It wasn't about the speed, it was about everything else. He hit the lights and accelerated, jaw clenched. Marcus saw the lights and calmly pulled over to the shoulder, putting the car in park and placing both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen. He'd been pulled over perhaps 3 times in his entire life, and each time he'd been respectful and compliant. That's what Ellen had taught their children, and it's what he believed was right. Officer Hastings approached the vehicle with an aggressive stride, his hand resting on his belt near his weapon. His face was flushed, eyes narrowed behind his sunglasses. "License and registration," he barked, not bothering with pleasantries. Now, Marcus reached slowly for his glove compartment. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm reaching for my registration now. My license is in my wallet in my back pocket. I didn't ask for commentary. Just do it." Marcus handed over the documents, his expression neutral but polite. Hastings snatched them from his hand and examined the Canadian driver's license with obvious disdain. "Canada, huh? You people think you can just come down here and ignore our laws? I apologize if I was speeding, officer. I wasn't paying close attention to my speedometer. 73 in a 65. That's reckless driving in my book." Hastings was lying. 8 miles over wasn't reckless, but he wanted to intimidate this driver. He wanted someone to feel as powerless as he did. "I understand. I'll accept whatever citation you feel is appropriate." Something about Marcus's calm demeanor infuriated Hastings further. He wanted resistance. He wanted an excuse to escalate. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why, officer?" "I said step out of the vehicle. Are you refusing a lawful order?" Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and slowly opened the door, stepping out with his hands visible. At 5'9" and 63 years old, he posed no physical threat, but Hastings circled him like a predator. "You been drinking?" "No, sir." "You seem nervous." "Why are you nervous?" "I'm not nervous, officer. Just respectful." Hastings leaned in close, and Marcus could smell coffee and cigarettes on his breath. "Here's what I think. I think you rich Canadians come down here in your fancy cars, thinking you're better than us, thinking our rules don't apply to you." Marcus glanced at his Honda Civic, then back at Hastings. "This car is 9 years old, officer. I'm just trying to visit my mother." "Oh, now you're making excuses? Playing the sympathy card with the mother story?" A semi-truck roared past, causing both men to sway slightly in the wind it created. Marcus remained quiet, sensing that anything he said would only make things worse. Hastings walked around the Honda, peering through the windows. "I'm going to search your vehicle. You got any drugs in there? Weapons? Anything illegal?" "No, sir. You're welcome to search, though I'd like to know the probable cause." That was the wrong thing to say. Hastings spun around, his face now crimson. "You questioning me? You questioning my authority?" "Not at all, officer. I'm simply hands on the hood." "Now." Marcus complied, placing his palms on the warm metal of his car. Hastings conducted an aggressive pat-down, checking pockets with unnecessary roughness. He found a wallet, a phone, and a small leather notebook. Opening the wallet, Hastings found several credit cards, a few family photos, and about $200 in cash. He held up the bills. "That's a lot of cash. You dealing drugs?" "It's $200, officer." "Answer the question. Why are you carrying this much cash?" "I prefer to pay cash at diners and motels. It's just a personal preference." Hastings pocketed the wallet and flipped through the leather notebook. It contained handwritten notes, sketches of what appeared to be engineering diagrams, and personal reflections. On one page, Marcus had written, "Ellen always said that wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. 3 years without her, and I'm still learning what that means." Hastings read it aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. "Ellen always said wealth is measured not by what you give away. So you're some kind of philosopher now? Some rich guy who thinks he's better than everyone?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten, the first crack in his composure. "That was written about my late wife. I'd appreciate if you'd appreciate." Hastings stepped closer, chest puffed out. "You're in no position to appreciate anything, buddy. You're on the side of a Nebraska highway, and I'm the one with the badge." A second police cruiser pulled up behind them. Officer Sarah Martinez, 34 years old with 7 years on the force, stepped out. She'd been driving by and noticed Hastings's vehicle, recognizing his unit number. She'd heard the rumors about his recent behavior, the anger issues, the complaints that had been quietly buried. "Everything okay here, Hastings?" Hastings turned, annoyed. "Fine, Martinez. Just processing a traffic stop." Martinez looked at Marcus, then at the Honda Civic, then back at Hastings. "Looks pretty routine. You need backup for a speeding ticket. I'm conducting a vehicle search. Suspected drug trafficking." Martinez's eyes narrowed. "Based on what probable cause?" "That's not your concern, Martinez. You can leave." But Martinez didn't leave. She'd seen this before. Good cops going bad, letting personal problems poison their judgment. She walked over to Marcus. "Sir, are you okay? Has Officer Hastings treated you appropriately?" Marcus hesitated. He could complain, but what good would it do? He just wanted to get to his mother. "I'm fine, officer. Just eager to continue my drive," Hastings interjected. "I'm writing him up for reckless driving, possession of suspicious amounts of cash, and failure to comply with a lawful order. 8 miles over isn't reckless," Martinez said quietly. "And $200 isn't suspicious." "Derek, what's really going on here?" "Stay out of this, Sarah." Marcus spoke up, his voice still calm but carrying a weight that made both officers pause. "Officer Hastings, may I share something with you? I'm not interested in your—" "Please, just 1 minute of your time." Something in Marcus's tone made Hastings stop. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe curiosity, but he crossed his arms. "Fine, 1 minute." Marcus leaned against his car, the afternoon sun casting a golden glow across the prairie. 35 years ago, I was a graduate student at the University of Toronto. I developed a prototype for a new type of battery, something I thought could change the world. I had no money, no connections, just an idea and determination. Hastings rolled his eyes, but Martinez listened. "One night I was pulled over by a Toronto police officer. I'd been driving my professor's car with permission, but the registration was expired. I was terrified. I was a Chinese immigrant, barely spoke English well, and I thought I was going to be arrested." Marcus removed his glasses and cleaned them with his sweater, a gesture that made him look vulnerable. "That officer, his name was Constable James Murray, could have impounded the car, arrested me, ruined everything. Instead, he listened. He called my professor to verify my story, gave me a warning, and told me something I've never forgotten." "What's that?" Martinez asked. He said, "Son, we're all just trying to get somewhere. Sometimes we need to help each other get there." Then he followed me back to campus to make sure I arrived safely. Hastings scoffed. "Great story. What's your point?" Marcus looked directly at him, and for the first time Hastings saw something in those eyes. Not fear, not arrogance, but a deep, weary understanding. "My point, Officer Hastings, is that 15 years later, Constable Murray's daughter was diagnosed with a rare form of leukemia. The treatment was experimental and expensive. When I heard about it through a mutual acquaintance, I paid for everything anonymously. She's 38 now, healthy, with 2 children of her own." The wind picked up, carrying dust across the highway. A hawk circled overhead. That moment of kindness, that choice to see me as a human being rather than a problem to be solved. It created a ripple effect. Constable Murray never knew what he'd done for me. Not really, but his compassion in that moment changed the trajectory of my entire life. Hastings felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. So what? You want me to let you go because of some sob story? No, Marcus said simply. I want you to understand that every interaction we have with another person is a choice. We can choose to see them as an obstacle, as someone beneath us, as a problem, or we can choose to see them as a fellow human being, trying to navigate this difficult world. Martinez spoke softly. Derek, why don't you run his license and write the speeding ticket? Let's keep this simple. Hastings walked back to his cruiser, Marcus's documents in hand. He sat in the driver's seat and ran the license through the system. What came back made his blood run cold. The database flagged Marcus Chen as a person of significant note, with instructions to contact the Canadian consulate if detained. Hastings' hands shook as he did a quick Google search on his phone. Marcus Chen, founder and CEO of North Star Technologies. Estimated net worth, $4.7 billion. Philanthropist who donated over $600 million to various causes. Recent recipient of the Order of Canada for contributions to renewable energy and humanitarian work. Hastings stared at the modest Honda Civic, at the man in the worn jeans leaning against it. He felt sick, not because he'd nearly arrested a billionaire, but because he'd treated another human being with contempt and cruelty. And that person had responded with patience and grace. He returned to where Marcus and Martinez waited. His swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked like shame. Mr. Chen, he started, his voice different now. Smaller. I apologize. Marcus shook his head. You don't need to apologize to me because of who I am or what I'm worth. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Hastings asked. And this time the question was genuine. Marcus took his license and registration back, holding them without looking at them. The point is that you didn't know who I was when you pulled me over, and you shouldn't have to know. Every person you stop, every person you interact with, deserves the same respect and dignity, whether they're a billionaire or homeless. Whether they're having the best day of their life or the worst. Hastings felt his eyes begin to burn. My wife left me. My son won't talk to me. I got passed over for detective again. I've been so angry. I understand anger, Marcus said quietly. When my wife died, I was furious at the world, furious at God, at fate, at the cancer that took her. For months, I treated people around me terribly because I was in pain. But here's what I learned. Our pain is never an excuse to cause pain in others. In fact, our own suffering should make us more compassionate, not less. Martinez stood silently, watching this exchange, feeling like she was witnessing something important. Marcus continued, Officer Hastings, you have a choice right now. You can continue down this path, letting your anger and disappointment poison every interaction, every relationship. Or you can make a different choice. You can decide that your pain will teach you empathy, that your struggles will help you understand others who are struggling. Hastings wiped his eyes roughly. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, because I've seen it. You stopped being cruel the moment you allowed yourself to be human. That's all it takes. Just remember that everyone you meet is carrying something heavy. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The three of them stood there on the shoulder of Interstate 80, cars occasionally whooshing past, the vast Nebraska sky stretching endlessly above them. In that moment, on that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, something shifted. Hastings pulled out his ticket book, then looked at it and put it away. I'm giving you a verbal warning for the speeding. Drive safely, Mr. Chen. And thank you, Marcus nodded. Thank you for listening. That takes courage. As Marcus walked back to his Honda Civic, Martinez approached Hastings. You okay? No, he admitted. But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's where change starts. Marcus drove away, checking his rearview mirror. He saw the two officers talking, Hastings with his hands in his pockets, head down, listening as Martinez spoke. He hoped the young officer would find his way. He hoped his words had meant something. 3 miles down the road, Marcus pulled into a rest stop. His hands were trembling slightly, the adrenaline of the encounter finally catching up with him. He sat in his car for several minutes, thinking about Ellen, about Constable Murray, about the strange web of human connection that defines our lives. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant in Vancouver. Margaret, it's Marcus. I need you to do something for me. Find out everything you can about a Nebraska state trooper named Derek Hastings. I want to know about his family situation, his career, any financial issues. Discreetly. Is everything all right? Margaret asked, concerned. Everything's fine. Just do this for me, please. 4 days later, After visiting his mother and holding her frail hand as she slept, Marcus returned home to Vancouver. Margaret had compiled a detailed report. Officer Derek Hastings, 42, 15 years on the force, going through a divorce. His wife citing emotional distance and anger issues. Son, Brandon, age 16, struggling in school. Hastings had been passed over for promotion multiple times due to complaints about his attitude. He was 3 months behind on his mortgage, drowning in legal fees from the divorce. Marcus read the report in his home office, surrounded by photographs of Ellen, their children, their grandchildren. He thought for a long time, then made several phone calls. 2 weeks later, Officer Derek Hastings received a letter. It was from an organization called the Murray Foundation, named after a Canadian police officer. The letter informed him that he'd been selected for a leadership scholarship that would fund his completion of a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and psychology, a requirement for the detective position he'd applied for. The scholarship included counseling services for him and his family, and a one-time grant to help with financial hardship. The letter included one note, handwritten, "Everyone deserves a second chance. Use yours to help others find theirs. A fellow traveler." Hastings stared at the letter for over an hour. He thought about the man in the Honda Civic, about that conversation on the highway. He thought about the choice he'd been given and the choice he'd made in that moment to listen, to be human. He called his ex-wife. For the first time in months, he didn't argue or defend himself. He apologized. He asked about their son. He listened. Then he called the number on the scholarship letter and accepted. He didn't know who had arranged this, but deep down, he suspected, and he understood that this wasn't charity. It was an investment, a belief that people could change, could grow, could become better versions of themselves. 6 months later, on a spring morning in Nebraska, Officer Derek Hastings, now enrolled in night classes and working with a therapist, pulled over a young Hispanic man driving with a broken taillight. The man was nervous, fumbling with his documentation, apologizing repeatedly. Hastings approached with patience. He listened to the man explain that he was on his way to a job interview, that he'd been out of work for 3 months, that he knew about the taillight but couldn't afford to fix it yet. "What kind of job?" Hastings asked. "Construction. It's with a big company. It could change everything for my family." Hastings looked at the man, seeing himself reflected there, the desperation, the hope, the fear. He thought about a silver Honda Civic and a billionaire in worn jeans who'd treated him like a human being. "Here's what we're going to do," Hastings said. "I'm going to write you a fix-it ticket for the taillight. You get it fixed within 30 days. Show proof to the courthouse, and there's no fine. But right now, I'm going to follow you to your job interview to make sure you get there safely and on time." The young man's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Everyone deserves a chance to get where they're going. Let's make sure you get there." As Hastings followed the man's battered truck down the highway, the morning sun painting the plains in gold and amber, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Not the empty power of a badge, but the profound responsibility of helping another human being. He would never know that the construction company conducting the interview was a contractor for North Star Technologies' new Nebraska facility. He would never know that Marcus Chen had quietly ensured that young man would be seriously considered for the position, and that if hired, he'd have access to the company's employee assistance programs. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the choice Hastings had made, and the choices he would continue to make every day after. Marcus Chen, meanwhile, continued his road trips across North America, driving his modest Honda Civic, staying in simple motels, eating at roadside diners. To most people, he was just another older gentleman passing through, perhaps a retired teacher or a widower looking for something he'd lost. But everywhere he went, he left ripples: a generous tip for a struggling waitress, an anonymous donation to a local library, a conversation with a troubled teenager at a rest stop that might, just might, change the trajectory of a life. He never sought recognition. Ellen had taught him that true generosity requires anonymity, that the moment you need acknowledgement for your kindness, it stops being about the other person and becomes about your ego. On the anniversary of Ellen's death, Marcus sat in a small church in Iowa. Not his denomination, not his tradition, just a quiet space where he could remember. He thought about the police officer on the highway, about Constable Murray, about all the invisible threads connecting human beings across time and space. He pulled out his leather notebook and wrote, "We are all just trying to get somewhere. The greatest thing we can do is help each other get there. Every encounter is a choice, to diminish or to elevate, to wound or to heal, to see obstacle or to see fellow traveler. Choose carefully, choose with love." Outside, the Iowa afternoon faded into evening. Somewhere in Nebraska, Officer Derek Hastings was reading bedtime stories to his son for the first time in months, their relationship slowly healing. Somewhere else, a young man was celebrating his first day at a new job, hope replacing despair. And somewhere on the infinite web of human connection, the ripples continued spreading, invisible but unstoppable, proof that one moment of choosing compassion over contempt, understanding over anger, humanity over power, can echo through countless lives in ways we'll never fully comprehend. Marcus Chen closed his notebook, offered a quiet prayer for Ellen, for Officer Hastings, for everyone struggling to find their way, and walked out into the gathering dusk. Tomorrow he would drive again, just another traveler on America's highways, carrying with him the most valuable currency in the world, the knowledge that kindness, even in the smallest doses, can change everything. The Canadian billionaire had indeed changed the way one police officer viewed life. But more than that, he'd reminded him of a simple truth that too often gets lost in our anger, our pain, our struggles for power and control. We are all just human beings, trying to survive, trying to matter, trying to get somewhere, and the greatest gift we can give each other is help along the way.